So, on today's episode of Creature Club, we are putting an official end to the Creature Club podcast and all of its subsidiaries. So, I'd like to start off the video by saying thank you to everybody who continued to support us throughout all of the hard times, through all kinds of weather and wear, basically. But yeah, it's all been really, really cool to be able to hear everybody say their piece and how they felt about various monsters and sending in all of their submissions for the homebrew stuff. Those two episodes are absolutely some of the closest to my heart because it really felt like part of a community kind of thing. But you know, it was beautiful while it lasted, but all great things must come to an end. So Creature Club was very important to me for a multitude of reasons. It kind of grew out of this other C&C podcast. We had Coffee and Chats before. I don't know if it's still up on YouTube, but if you delve deep, you might be able to find it. But it was myself and Dan and Mikey and occasional guests. Shout out to Johnny Byford with his Cooking with Daniel segment. But it was just myself. I think it started with Mikey and Dan wanting to do a podcast together for Coffee and Chats, and then I just became a regular. And then we wanted to do something more structural because we kept talking about other stuff. But Creature Club was kind of born of the idea that we needed some structure, so we decided to work through the Monster Manual, and to our best ability we did. And it was so important to me because I wanted to be able to contact and remain in contact with two of my very best friends, Mikey and Dan, whose birthdays are on the same day as my wife, Ivy, who's been also enormously supportive. It also helped get us through, a lot. When we started, I was in a pretty bad place, mentally. I hadn't got a job in such a long time, and so this was something that I could really focus my creative energies into. I had stifled myself with my music, and job searches were going nowhere, and I had no idea what to do with my life. But this show, as well as various other things, Quest Boys, I'm sure you heard us reference that during the podcast, were very important linchpin things in my life around which I was able to continue, I guess, going, because I was in a really bad place, to be perfectly honest. So, finding something like that is important for anybody who's struggling. So I hope that we were some comfort to some people, in as much as recording and working on the podcast was for me. As far as we got, the old Fomorians in the 5th edition Monster Manual, which this is the official one, which I will be auctioning off in a charity auction. No, I won't. Sorry, just couldn't help myself. But the Fomorians were here, page 136 out of 316, which I thought was great because both of those have the same numbers in them, 316 and 136. That was very satisfying to me. I didn't realize that until I opened the book to have this little bit, but I was very happy with that. And 136 is shy of the halfway point of the monsters, but throughout that we had such fantastic creative fun with all of these incredible monsters, and being able to talk about the history in the real world was an incredible joy for me because I love mythology, and being able to look into the real world history gave me a broader breadth of knowledge about ancient cultures and incredible things that came from superstition and from myth and legend, and just all this incredible stuff was revealed to me through all of this. And I think that's something that I'll try to keep up for myself. What's the history of fungi? Where did they come from? What are they? That's a mystery that no one has been able to quite solve, because they're not quite plant, they're not quite animal, they're something else entirely, but they're also, I don't know, they're a whole thing. But anyway, Fomorians are as far as we got. Felt appropriate to end on an Irish monster, so I was, satisfied enough with that. Despite all of that, it did kind of start to become kind of a chore rather than a joy towards the end. I'm sure you noticed there was substantial amount of time between episodes towards the very end. I think we had maybe 5 episodes in our last kind of 3/4 of a year that we were posting. And part of that is due to me being one of the main editors, like Mikey was working and I was working occasionally, and I just didn't put the time in. I definitely had the time, but I just didn't, do the things that I could have done because I had focus elsewhere or because I just didn't feel like doing it. So we kind of decided to put the nail in the coffin of it, and I think it's not an unreasonable thing to do. We kind of looked at ourselves and talked to each other and voiced our opinions, and we felt like bringing an end to it at this point felt appropriate to us. So apologies if it landed short of some of your other monsters. I remember we talked about in at least 1 or 2 episodes about how zombies is going to be 70 years in the future. But yeah, it was a fantastic little ride, and I'm glad to have been part of it because the guys are amazing and I am eternally thankful for them. Some of the standout moments of the podcast for me were definitely when Mikey and I sat down to write the original intro, the little kind of mandolin or lute track with the flute by the crackling fire. I don't even remember if it had a flute in it. Anyway, but we sat down and recorded that, and we were very happy with it because it was this kind of, telling tales around a fire about these monsters that you might have encountered while you were out and about. Kind of made it like an adventuring thing, and that was reflected in our logo, the dice with the hat and the pen and the spyglass, because we were meant to be these investigators, these people that were kind of bardish in the recording and the music and storytelling, and also investigators in learning all the background history and trying to look through the lore. And it kind of was what it was, and it was a lot of fun. But orchestrating that later on into the kind of full orchestral thing, I was very, very proud of that. That was a little labor of love for the podcast that I felt like I could do, and so decided to do. There's a full version. I think it's played at the end of most of the episodes. I think it's almost certainly at the end of all the episodes that I edited, but I could be wrong. One of my favorite episodes would probably be the Centaurs episode. I don't know why specifically Centaurs brought out that kind of cool creativity from us, but it was just an incredible little episode. We started off being so pissed off at the Centaurs for being boring, and then we came up with this incredible like thunderhoof, like they go through the thunder plains and there's always lightning, and they're these incredible elemental lightning creatures with their thundering hoofs, and then we just kind of ran with that, and that was such a special little spark of creativity that Mikey and Dan and I kind of morphed it from this like stupid boring dude horse to these super cool, evocative, like storytelling beat that could be brought into almost any setting if you wanted to have like a side story, or even if you just wanted to expand into it. Because that was what this podcast was all about. It was about looking at concepts and expanding on them or reducing them to whatever our needs were, and being part of that creative process as like a loosening of the binds on DMs who would come up with this cool stuff but then never be able to share it because their players went off somewhere else, or they just never quite fit into the thing, or there was never enough focus to fully understand the depth of the work that went into them. So Centaurs was definitely one of the absolute favorites. It sits in my mind as one of our best as well. And it's called Dungeons and Dragons, and dragons are in the monster manual, but I don't know why we didn't do them. 2020 came, and that would have been the time when dragons happened, but we just didn't. I completely, that part of my memory is gone. No, I'm kidding, of course. The fact that 2020 was when Dragons started, our first episode was Dragons Part 1, was, I don't know, it felt appropriate, but I feel like it might have also been a part of the kind of burnout that we started feeling for it, because, you can only talk about Frightful Presence so many times before you start to literally lose your fucking mind, which I think we did a little bit. And part of me feels like that might have been what knocked the spice out of it for us, but we still enjoyed it, and we had our fun, and we talked about it, and there were some legitimately cool little ideas that we came up with for some of the dragons, and for like collaborations between dragons, and it was a good time, but it was a hard time, basically. We had to slog through, I can't even remember how many dragons there were, I could go and look it up, but I'm not going to. But it was a good time. It was a fun time, and I'm glad that we did it, and I'm glad that I've done the whole thing. It's really just been such an enjoyment. It's such an enjoyment that I've gotten from this experience with the guys and with all of you, basically, the audience who, we probably would have just kept doing it if we didn't have an active audience, but we had an active audience. We had people submitting homebrew. We had Chris Stewart and Brafu, the Holy Man, patron saint of the podcast, and we had so many people submit homebrews. We didn't get around to doing an episode 3, but, that's fine. But the participation and people voicing their love for the show was truly heartwarming, and it really was part of what made Slogging Through Dragons and the kind of lower portions. I knew I had to edit the episodes when I had to edit the episodes, and I'd be able to take a deep breath and be able to bring myself to, sit down for the 4.5, 5, upwards of 6 hours occasionally to edit the episodes, because I wanted to put that much life into them. I wanted to edit it so that it had fun little rings and knocks, and my little Banshees episode thing, I put the time in because I felt like my section explaining the Banshee didn't do it justice. So I cut out that entire section of the history and then plopped in my little section about the Banshee with original music by me. It was kind of improvised on the flute. I had a traditional wooden Irish flute that I was using, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great creative process, and just thank you all so much for being on that little adventure, a little journey with us, because I think it was really, really worth it. I really, truly enjoyed it, and thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. And I'm sure the other guys' videos will corroborate basically everything that I've said, that we did it for us, but you guys were there for as much of the journey as you were. And everything's going to be still up on YouTube. We're not getting rid of it. We've removed it from Spotify and various other places, but it's definitely still on YouTube, and it'll always be there. I don't think we have any obligations to host it anywhere else, and, it'll be what it'll be. And thank you all so much, and I love the guys, Mikey and Dan. They're brilliant. So thank you all so much. Thank you for being part of it. And I've been Tim. Mikey, stay cool.
Hi everyone, this is Dan from Creature Club. As you can probably tell from the video or the other two's introductions, if they've already spoken, this is the end of Creature Club. It's been a really good time. We had a lot of fun with the project. When we started it 5 years ago, we were in very different places, geographically and figuratively. And since then, it's become more difficult to record. And in the last year or so, we privately made a decision to close up. We've been preparing an archive since then. We wanted to make sure there was a way to catch up with it if people missed it. So this is a farewell and a thank you very much for listening. The internet is a very big place. It gets bigger every year. And we are very, very grateful that anyone noticed what we made and cared about it and engaged with us. We were very fortunate. We had very good listeners who paid attention to what we said, who bounced off our ideas, who corrected us when we were wrong, who took part in our homebrew challenges. It was a really exciting and interesting ride, and thank you very much for being part of it. It is a shame we didn't get through the Monster Manual, but I don't think we realized how big a task that would be when we decided to do it 5 years ago. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. We all do. What I'd like to close out on and pass on is, since February last year, this is in 2023, I'm not sure when the video is going up, I actually haven't played any D&D 5th edition, even though we did make a few episodes after that. I've sort of moved on to other games, not because D&D 5th edition is a bad game, but it is a game that has a lifespan, like every game. And so I've moved on to other games. I've moved on to Pathfinder 2. I've played a bit of Lancer, which I really enjoy, and I've also taken an interest in Icon, which is a game from one of the designers behind Lancer. It's their own take on a fantasy RPG. It's still in playtest, but the material is freely available right now, and it's very interesting. So in the context of Creature Club, we spoke a lot about D&D, but really one of my great passions is trying new things, especially new games. And I find it difficult sometimes to do that. So I think that's a message I'd like to end on. Try new games, not because D&D is bad, not because it's imperfect, but just because trying new things is its own reward. If you're not sure where to start, Lady Blackbird by John Harper, the designer of Blades in the Dark, is a fantastic one-page RPG. Comes with pre-made characters, comes with a pre-written scenario. You basically don't have to do any work. You just have to learn a philosophy of play, which can be harder than a set of rules. But it's a lot of fun. If you get it with the right group, it can be some of the most fun you'll ever have. So yeah, try new things. Play with the numbers, play with the dice. And thank you again for taking part in our project. Yeah. Okay. Goodbye.
Hello, everyone. This is Mikey from Creature Club. We started the show about 6 years ago. And when you listen to those first few episodes, you can really sense the enthusiasm that the three of us had for this project. When we came up with the idea together, I think it was Tim who first had the idea, really, and then we kind of just riffed on it. But when we decided to do this show, we thought we struck gold for our own skills at running a D&D game and for whoever would listen to us. We think that everybody would benefit from this show who plays tabletop role-playing games. And that's why we kept doing it, because it was beneficial for a D&D nerd, but it was also fun for the three of us to do. We got to just have a laugh while we did it. And we just kept doing it for many years after that. For literal years. It's crazy. I can listen to an episode of Creature Club podcast and I can remember where I was at that specific time. And it's funny how a lot of my life has changed and Creature Club podcast was kind of a constant during it. But with all that being said, I just wanted to say that I kind of fell out of love with the hobby. I'm not as passionate about tabletop role-playing games as I was. Towards the end of the show, I didn't really want to talk about them. And I didn't feel as enthusiastic to talk about them. And then whenever a recording session came along, I didn't know what to say, and I kind of didn't want to do it. And that's nothing to be said for, like, Daniel and Tim, because the best parts about the show, in my opinion, are the ones where the three of us are just having a laugh. And I loved that part. I loved that side of Creature Club. I just wasn't into the D&D part anymore. And I felt like I wasn't giving as much to the show anymore. And I think that, plus the three of us not really playing 5th edition anymore, all added to us not recording as much as we did. And I think recently we just went like, do we want to do this show anymore? And we just came to agreement and we said, no, let's stop it. Maybe it's time to just pack it up. And that's what we're doing right now. And we wanted to make this little video here to say goodbye and thank you. So, yeah, thank you so much for listening to the show. There's so many shows on the internet, and it's amazing that we found a good few people that listen to us and have sent us emails and messages and tweets saying that they like the show and saying that they use things from our show for their own D&D games. That means a lot. People who send in homebrews for our homebrew special is all amazing. We had a little community, and it was great. It was the reason why we kept doing the show. Whenever we got a message from someone that we didn't know from the internet, and it was a lovely big email saying how Creature Club helped them in their games, it made our day. We shared around between the three of us. We was like, look at this is cool, right? Someone's listened to us. And yeah, it's amazing. It was the reason why we did it. It was the reason why we kept doing it. You know, one of the reasons anyway. And I'm sorry that the show has to end. I'm a different person than I was when the show first started. And sometimes things have to end. And that's just an unfortunate reality of life. Doesn't mean it's not a bit sad, but it's just how it works sometimes, I guess. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to look back at what we had and really enjoy those times together. Will the three of us ever work on something again? Never say never. If I was to do anything on the internet, I sure hope it's with Dan and Tim. But let's see what the future holds. Thank you so much for listening to Creature Club Podcast, folks. It really did mean a lot to us. This is goodbye. Maybe our paths will cross again in the future. And for one last time, I've been Mikey. Stay cool.